All right. We have a great guest on today. Coach Ault spent 35 years coaching, most of it coaching the girls basketball at high school level. Wildly successful coach. We have him on today because we're going to talk about a topic that we think is real important and has to do with parents and coaching and where does the line get crossed on certain things, and then support from administration and how that can really affect coach's experience. And Coach wrote a great book about it called Out of Bounds. It's available on Amazon. I'll let him talk about it if there's any other places, but I know it's available out there on Amazon.com. And it's a book really about his situation where he ended up leaving Holmdel and was released there unceremoniously after a very, very successful run as a coach for a very long time, and a team that I think that he was building at the time, from my understanding, that was really going to be a fantastic. Already was a very good team, but he had a younger group that was going to be a fantastic group. That ended up being some really good athletes in that group, and there was a whole lot of politics and a whole lot of nonsense that went on in that process. And we're going to kind of unpack it all. But before we do that, I want to let Coach Ault really talk about his background in coaching, and then we'll dive into everything within the book. So without further ado, welcome, Coach Ault.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Dave and Derek. Appreciate it. I spent 33 years coaching basketball. Started out at the Naval Academy Prep School I was an ensign in the Navy at the time and was coaching the men's side, college prep, essentially, young men getting ready for the attendance at the Naval Academy. I did that for 4 seasons. We played a lot of college, Division I college JV teams when they still had JV teams back in the day. Then I went on to start coaching here in New Jersey with the grammar school at Holy Family Catholic School, 7th and 8th grade boys. So all my early coaching was with young men, trying to get them ready for the next stage in life. And then at one point, a job opened up at Modern Day High School in Middletown, New Jersey. And I ended up coaching both the boys' grammar school and the girls' varsity high school team at the same time in overlapping seasons. So you can imagine I wasn't very popular at home at that time,
Right.
as I was always on the road. But that's where I really got the bug to engage and start coaching with high school girls at the varsity level in the Shore Conference for New Jersey, which is undoubtedly the best conference of basketball in the state of New Jersey. And I coached at Modern Day for 12 years. After I left there, I was given the honor, actually, of being asked to be the assistant coach for Don Carpel at St. John Vianney. So for 6 years, I had the best of the best jobs. I was kind of the first person on the bench for Don. I was the team psychologist for the girls, just trying to pick them up when they're coming off the floor because they missed a basket, in probably the most competitive games in a schedule that any high school team would have. And they'd even taken that ride straight up to the Tournament of Champions victory that we had, finishing our unfinished business at the time of getting Dawn her TOC championship as a coach. So toward the back end of that, I started to get a little bit of an itch. Like I wanted to have my own program again. I wanted to build something. So kind of bring what I learned from St. John Vianney and from my previous experience to a different program. And the job opened up at Holmdel. So I interviewed for that job, took that role, and really started with a minimum program. I mean, there were 16 girls for the entire program my first year there. And I was pulling people in from the bleachers basically to try and fill out a roster for both programs, JV and varsity. And then just started building from there. And we were having a great time, had some good young athletes, and then a mix of, people who just wanted to be out and be a part of a team and get the experience. And from there, over 3.5 years, going into my 4th year at Holmdel, we had built a program that was primed and ready to go for legitimate state competition. So that's kind of the Reader's Digest version of my 33 years.
And then after that was when, and the talk about, the stage that led to kind of the departure at that point, because you had a wildly successful career up until that point, had a great reputation as a coach, and then talk about kind of what happened which led to the kind of departure?
Sure. So at the end of my third year at Holmdel, we had a real good core group of athletes coming back. I had two rising seniors who are now currently playing in collegiate basketball, one at Colgate, one at Emory. I had a really good rising junior class that was coming in, including a young lady who had transferred back to Holmdel. She'd been lured away to go play for Manasquan. And I mean, I get it. There's certainly a big draw out there to play for Coach Kokoda at Manasquan. And a very, very competitive team, very, very successful team. But she came back to Holmdel. So that was a nice addition. And then I had a couple players that were really good role players and still maturing in the game and trying to understand how to think the game as well as just play it. And then I had a rising sophomore who was just a stud athlete, and her older sister had played for me. She came on board, and I was really just trying to get her to kind of calm down enough to let her talent come out in a team environment. So very excited about the fourth year. As a matter of fact, toward the end of the third year, we had defeated RBC, Red Bank Catholic, in our home gym.
Huge win.
I'm sorry, Derek, I didn't.
No, I said that's a huge, for people that don't understand that the scope of winning that game, right, in where you're located and whatnot, whether it be, just within the shore itself, geographically, like that is just a monstrous win, right? To move that program, kind of kickstart the next season with a big win like that.
Yeah, it was phenomenal. The place was packed. It was a great game, and we actually there was a point where RBC had started to press and come back. The momentum had shifted a little bit. And in the first 2 years of my program at Holmdel, that would have been the beginning of the end. Like the wheels would have started to fall off, and we didn't have the leadership, the moxie to kind of pull it all back together. That third year was different. They came in. They were number 3 in the Shore. They were number 9 in the state, highly ranked as they usually are. Very good program, loaded with D1 players. And my ragtag team kind of put it all together, and we ended up beating them at the end of that game. So that kind of was the beginning for us of legitimacy. People really started to notice us, notice Holmdel. Hey, it's a legitimate program. And, oh, by the way, they're returning everybody next year. So that set up my fourth year. And I was excited. We were very thrilled. Me and my staff, we knew what we had in place. We knew what we could accomplish. The question really became at that point, because we had graduated a couple of key players, is who's going to fill the bench? Who's going to be the role players that can help us stretch our legs in the game, can help us stay challenged in practice so that we're sharp for games. And I looked to a young sophomore class and a unproven freshman group to try and figure out who would be those pieces. So the early part of the season was devoted to that. You have some full-time JV players that I'm watching in practice, trying to see where they're competing, how they're competing, and whether or not they're ready for a test at varsity. Right. I had some swing players who can play JV and varsity. They're allowed 5 quarters a game, or 5 quarters a day for every game.
Right.
And so I'd get them in the game mix, have them come practice with varsity full-time and see what was going on. And really started to develop a young, talented bench. A couple of freshmen, a couple of sophomores who at minimum were good role players, could come in and give me some relief, help us out in any kind of foul trouble situation without losing a lot of continuity in the game. And that's where we had finally positioned ourselves, that rhythm, that flow of substitution, of the younger talent understanding what their position is. In the context of the overall team play. And at one point for the holiday tournament, we struggled with COVID. This was post the actual COVID year, but the COVID was still a thing, obviously still is. And a couple of my JV players got sick, and 2 of them happened to be swing players to varsity. So I shut them down for the holiday tournament, and I asked my coaching staff, who do we bring up to fill that role? Because we're going to need players on the bench still, right? Who's ready for a test at the varsity level? And my assistant coaches selected one sophomore player, and I agreed right away. She'd been working very hard, was trying to match the skill sets to her effort. So I brought her up for a taste of what varsity play might look like should she get in. And I chose the other one, and it was a freshman who I knew had talent and practiced pretty well, but she had been injured during the summer and fall, so we didn't get to see a lot of her in real competitive situations.
Right.
And I also knew that it could be a nice boost for her, you know, just, hey, listen, I got a chance. Let me go get it. Even if I go back to JV afterwards, you know, I'm proving that I'm ready to do this. So brought them up. They helped us out through COVID. And then shortly after the holiday break and the tournament, I put them back down at JV because neither one of them were really ready for that position yet.
It was a situational move, right? I mean, you're looking, COVID hits, and look, we dealt with it through, you know, with football and everything. I mean, it was just a crazy time, and you're still looking, you're still looking to take care of those things. But the holiday tournament is also like, you know, from what I've known, it's always that good time where you can kind of, you know, allow certain players to get healthy if they need to, like this right here, situational wise, give those other girls a little bit of a boost where they're going to be playing high level competition to see that, hey, all right, you're not here now, you're here because we have this going on. But if you continue to work, right, this is where you could end up eventually as the season progresses. Is that kind of the whole method to the madness, as you know, how you kind of worked it?
Yeah, Derek, that's spot on. And I'd even told the two young ladies when I let them know that they were going to go back to JV, I told them to hang on to the varsity uniforms because I fully expect them to be back.
Right, because you want to give those, and especially, you know, younger players, right? You want to give them that level of, you know, you can talk about the expectations that you have for them and whatnot, but when you actually put them on the bench or you actually put them in a situation in that game, practice is one thing, right? And even if they're practicing against the high level talent and all those other kind of things, but that game action of now, hey, now you've really seen it. Now you've been in it. Like this should now be fuel for you to continue to work in practice, continue to get better. And then eventually, as we move forward, you know, you'll be part of this.
Yes, that's exactly right. And even I was a big proponent of kids learning the game, right? Thinking the game, understanding the game. So even with my injured players, I would tell them, you sit right next to me on the bench because I want you to see what I see and I want you to hear what's being said from the coach's perspective to help them understand that game. And the same was very true for anybody who happened to be sitting on the bench, whether they were full-time varsity players, swing players, or people who had just been brought up to fill the void during COVID.
So talk about what transpired after you did that and where the issues kind of came in.
Yeah. So what transpired is we continued our regular season. We had 3 games back in conference. Actually, one with Toms River North, who was a top 10 team at the time, preseason. And then we had 2 conference games. And then we were getting ready for the next game, which would full circle was Red Bank Catholic back in our gym, who you knew was going to be awful mad at the fact that we had just beaten them the year before. And all of those kids came back. So all of those kids had that bitter taste, right? And of course, the coach is super successful and very competitive, and we're friendly. But at the end of the day, he wanted to get revenge. So we're building for that. We had during the summer and fall, I had gone to visit college, TCNJ, where one of my players was, and the coach got me in, and I was picking up a few things, some things that I thought would flow very well with what we did. So I wanted to try them, and we were just starting to see the success of that. You know, they were supplemental to what our offenses were. They were a little bit of change in conditioning, which made, as a defensive first coach, made our defense even more difficult to play against. And all of that was finally starting to come to fruition as we went through those 3 games prior to RBC. Then we had RBC in our gym, and you can imagine the hype. My girls wanted to get back at it. They wanted to prove they were for real. And again, RBC very highly positioned in Shore Conference and the state. So this was one of those games that, with the momentum that we had coming off of 3 straight wins, are we ready for this next step? Can we break into that top 20 New Jersey State ranking? Can we break into the top 10 Shore? And we fought a battle with RBC, just an absolute battle, where they ended up coming out on top this time. But it was to the point where I was having my girls foul intentionally to slow the clock so we could try and get extra possessions. This is one of those really, really well played high school games. And one of my seniors had come out just absolutely on fire, executing our scout to the max, where I had told her that their 6'5" center was going to be guarding her. She will not guard you past the free throw line. So as we're going through our offensive sets and you're running off of those staggered screens and things like that, you come shot ready. And she hit 3 straight threes with an identical description. The big for RBC just stopped short, and my girl stuck all 3. And they call a timeout, and we're on fire, and the crowd's going crazy. And she came back, and she's all hyped up. And my typical thing is to give them a high five on a pat on the back. Great job, just trying to keep them hyped. And then in that timeout, we talked about, okay, now she's probably going to come plowing through some screens, and you need to be ready to shot fake and rip and go, right? And I mean, I couldn't have written the script any better. She comes off of that staggered screen, the 6'5" girls pushing through, coming through, and she closes out hard, high and hard. And my center, who's 6'1" and just, a thinner frame, gives a little shot fake and rips and goes to the left side and scores a bucket. So now in the first quarter, she's got 11 points, and we are just on fire. It was a really fun game. And from there, it became just this hotly contested battle. So we went back and forth on that for a while. We ended up losing by 9. But when I got in the locker room, I'm like, this was great. And the girls weren't used to me being happy after losses. But I said, we are where we need to be. Things are starting to click. And that chemistry was absolutely palpable. You could feel it in that space. So much so that the girls were coaching themselves in the locker room. Right. They were keeping each other up. And I told them at the end of that, at the end of the game in our last huddle, that when we play Ewing, that upcoming Saturday, who was a top 20 team in the state, we will be in the top 20. We will be top 10 in the Shore. And that was the last thing I said to my girls.
Okay. And so after that, what then, transpired? So you were no longer coaching after that point, or?
So I got a call the next morning from the principal, who I thought was calling me to congratulate us on a game well played, and kind of we talked sports outside of school stuff. So that's what I thought I was getting the call for. He called to let me know that I had been suspended indefinitely for what he labeled as inappropriate touching.
Okay, so going back to the game, when you pat the girl on the back, is that what he was the complaint was about, or?
So I don't know. I asked him specifically, what are the details? I can't tell you, was his answer. Who's my accuser? I can't tell you. Right. Do I get a chance to talk to the athletic director, to whoever, to kind of sort this out? Because it was completely out of left field, completely. Right. And it was just, I can't tell you. I don't know. There were no answers given. And then I asked, so I assume my assistant coach, who happens to be my son, is going to take over coaching of the team until this gets sorted out. And he said, no, he's suspended too. So I asked why. And the answer was, quote, because he has your last name, unquote. I'm like, what does that mean? Right. So here's somebody who's being guilty by association of being my son, which I didn't realize that was a crime of any kind or against any school policy. But basically my coaching staff was removed. The principal and a couple assistants came in to take over the team from that point.
And when that happened and you didn't get any other, so you're suspended, and then what happened after the suspension? So then you were fired from the job, or did they bring you in? What happened after that point?
So that's the shame of it all. This dragged out for 40 days. So basically through the entirety of the season, minus the state playoffs, essentially. And when I say dragged out, it dragged. There were no answers. I was calling to try and get direction. Like when, obviously there's a due process in our country, the presumption of innocence till proven otherwise. And I was looking for some support in that regard. Like when does my story get to be heard? When do I get to understand what the accusations actually are? Because I had no idea to that point. And I was just kind of put off. It's going through a process. You'll be, eventually you'll be allowed to have your story heard or something like that. It was just dragged out. So about day 14 or so, I find out that the girls are being called in one by one to the police department in Holmdel. And at that point, to me, things changed, right? And why are they being pulled into the police? And I didn't even know that. So my assumption was that I would be pulled into the police station sooner or later myself. had to go out and hire an attorney at my own expense. Basically was left hanging by the administration as to any guidance, any direction, any rationale as to what was going on.
And then, so what happened per those police investigations? Did the police bring you in? What happened there?
So after apparently each of the girls came in and was questioned, I was pulled in. I forget the exact day now, but I think it was like 19 days later. So 19 days after the suspension, I finally get to talk to somebody about what went on, or at least get, in my hopes, an inkling of what I was being actually accused of. What was the evidence that had me on the sidelines, so to speak. I walked through the police station and literally 5 to 7 police officers, chief, lieutenant, sergeant, came out, greeted me, shook my hand. We're sorry you're here. We know this is bullshit. Pardon me. Probably shouldn't have said that.
No, you can say. You can say.
You know, things like that. And I go back and sit in the investigation room or the questioning room with 2 detectives. One a detective for Holmdel, the other the district attorney's detective. And they're basically just hitting me with questions, and my attorney, of course. And they're just asking me questions, and I answered everything from start to finish. And at one point they asked me, after 45 minutes of being interviewed, without any showing of any kind of evidence, mind you, or even what the accusation actually is,
Right.
They finally asked me, is there anything else you'd like to say? And I told them bluntly, I said, let's just call this what it is. This is a freshman player and her parents who feel like she should be at varsity and are using 2 other girls as quote unquote victims to get at me, which is what I had been able to piece together during those 19 days from other parents and other players and what the information that they were sharing with me.
Right.
So a freshman parent that didn't like the fact that they were no longer on varsity, essentially, is what you deducted. Now, going forward, did you ever find out what the actual accusation was? Did you ever find out what the reason was for the suspension? Did the police give you an outcome of that? Did they pursue any criminal actions?
The police, that was a Friday. I think it was a Friday that I went to the police station. That following Monday, they issued the school a report of non-criminality, that there was nothing there. And the school sat on that for 4 days. They did nothing with it for 4 days. Then I finally got a notice from the school. This is now 29 days into the suspension. Again, no evidence, no accusation, no talking to the school. Never talked to me directly from that point on, and only the police report of non-criminality. Then I get finally February 3rd, I believe it was. I get a hey, we'd like to meet with the board. Would like to meet with you on February 9th. And this is.
Did you end up going in? Did you end up going in and meeting with the board?
Yeah. Okay. Listen, I wanted to get to the bottom of this. I still,
of course,
foolishly, I still had hopes I could get back on the sideline and finish what was to be our season. This is what we've been building for.
I mean, this is the culmination of years of work. You finally get back on the sidelines, right? And you're year 3. I mean, now this is into year 4. You see all the work that's been put into it, where now this culmination of, all right, things are finally starting to come together and we're clicking. And now all of a sudden you're blindsided by this. And now here you are just literally trying to find answers to get this situation under control, if not even for yourself, for the girls themselves and their program, right? Because like you said, this was dragging on for 40 days in the midst of a season where things are just so out of whack now for them. Here you are, like, absolutely, you're going to go in and have a meeting and get to the bottom of it and hope for the best things that could happen especially when you're not being given any answers.
What
did the board have to say when you went in there? What did they discuss with you? What was
so let me preface that a little bit with a couple of details that I didn't get to. Number one, throughout this entire process, I mean, I don't get a whole lot of texts outside of business, but I was getting hammered on my phone from coaches, athletic directors, referees, parents, kids, students, people I coached 30 years ago who were hitting me up with a ton of support, right? This is happening every day. The day I got suspended, an hour later, I'm getting texts from people like, how the hell do they know I got suspended?
Yeah.
Newspaper reporters, people reaching out to me just like, we know this isn't true. Tell us what's going on. And I held them at bay for a while. January 26th, which was 2 weeks after I got suspended, there was an actual board meeting. And 16 parents representing 16 families went to that board meeting on my behalf. They read a letter from the parents, including alumni parents, that wanted immediate reinstitution of me and my coaching staff and full support. Then one of the other mothers of one of the supposed victims, who was the senior captain who had lit up RBC in that first quarter, right? She read a letter on behalf of all the players except for one, stating the same thing, that they wanted the coaching staff back. So all this community support, and even people outside of the Holmdel community were supporting me. And it fell on deaf ears in terms of the administration, in terms of the board. So when I finally got in front of the board, it was 3 representatives from the board, one of which was the acting superintendent and their attorney, me and my attorney. And we were going through some basic conversation at first. And then they said, finally, would you like to see the evidence? So this 40 days later is the first time I'm ever getting to see the so-called evidence. Right? So I'm like, yeah, fire away, because I'm curious. And they pull up the computer screen, and there are 3 icons on the computer screen. 2 videos, 1 picture. Click on the first video, and it's not even from the RBC game. It's from a scrimmage 5 weeks prior when we were scrimmaging Manasquan. And my senior captain came out, and as standard, I would give her a high five and a pat on the back. And that's all it was. It was like 3 seconds, bang, bang, bang. And the camera's right behind me. I know that. That's where we video from, right? So they show that, and the lady says to me when she hit stop, she goes, can you explain that? And I said, explain what? I'm obviously congratulating a young lady who came out. I gave her a high five on the pat on the back. And they didn't have an answer for that, right? Like, what do you want me to explain there? I'm congratulating a young girl. I'm trying to build her up, trying to keep her going. So they said, well, would you like to see the other one? I said, yeah, keep going, because I haven't seen anything yet that merits what I'm going through. So they click play on the second one, and it's the exact same video. The exact same video. Which right there told me that nobody took a second to even look at what they were considering to be evidence when you've got 2 clips of the same video. So then I pointed out, that's the same video. You want me to explain it again? And then I said, well, why don't you just show me what the third thing is? And the third thing was a still photo taken from a video, which again, the camera's right behind me, where I am going to pat one of my sophomore stud on the back. And the person who was manipulating this stopped it to where it looked like my hand was on her butt. But it was a still photo.
I figured that's where they were going with it. I figured that's where the whole thing was going.
So because of the camera position, it would have looked that way if my hand was 3 feet away, 3 inches away, or actually touching her, because it was from directly behind me.
Right.
And it was just a still photo. So again, I'm asked to explain it. Again, it's very obvious I'm trying to encourage a young player who came to me off, as she's coming off the floor in that full video, which they didn't have, with her shoulders shrugged and her head down because she felt like she did something wrong. Mm-hmm. So when I watched the full clip of the video after the board meeting, you could see that as I swing through, I actually hit her in the lower back because that's where her shirt crumples. But again, nobody took the time to actually investigate that whole reel, which was 2 minutes long.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. And did they ever come out and say like that was the exact thing that they were holding against you, or was it anything else besides that? I mean, that
was it. That was the evidence. And by the way, the first video clip of the senior captain, her father wrote a scathing email to the rest of the team, to the parents who were using his child as a way to get at me.
It's
Obviously, he supported me, and he was one of the biggest supporters out there.
right. It's it's crazy, and once they get it in their head, administrators, that they're trying to do something or going a different direction, or some parent complains that they want to listen to, they're just gonna trump up charges. Did your lawyer what did your lawyer have to say? Was he? I'm assuming he was in with you in the board meeting, correct?
He was. He was,
Okay.
but to be honest with you, I did most of the talking. As a matter of fact, when
Okay.
their attorney started to present, things, I often would refute him with letter and chapter and paragraph of the board's own publication, their own policies
Policies, right?
Right.
around how they're not even following it. One of which was if an accusation like this came up, there was to be a written letter to the accused and what the actual violations of the policy were, what the accusations were. I never once received anything in writing from the Holmdel the entire time. Not even 40 days later did I ever know exactly what I was being accused of and what policies I had broken. And so I quoted that to him verse and chapter, and he's like, no, that's for the student section. And I said, no, this is policy 4150 out of the faculty and staff members, and I did that 3 times to him. And so my lawyer finally says, you have to pardon Darren's indignance, is what he called it, because he's frustrated. He's, there's a violation of rights and simple decency here that is hard to overcome, especially with what we're presented with.
And then what was your lawyer's advice going forward? I mean, move on, or just what was his kind of his or hers kind of advice from there?
Well, his first thing was to obviously protect me and positionally my son as well, even though my son had never been accused of anything, nothing. Matter of fact,
but they threw him into that whole thing just with that whole, hey, your last name thing, so now it's, guilty by association in the same facet,
Yeah, and with him, they threw in, I had just brought in a young lady from alumni from St. John Vianney who had just graduated college. So she was my unpaid or volunteered assistant coach. Somebody who had gone to the TOC and hit a big bucket, hit the bucket that put us ahead in that game, to help her bring a certain level of experience and knowledge to the girls that maybe I can't give them. Maybe they don't relate to me with, but here's a young lady who's been through it. And then I had a 72-year-old volunteer who's somebody I coached against 30 some years ago, who we just admired the way we both went at it in the game, and the respect and dignity we brought to our players and to our programs. And he was there to help us. And they dismissed everybody without cause, without consideration.
Just wipe the slate clean.
Yep. Under the guise that there was this investigation and you give us some time, you might be able to come back. That was, I don't think, ever going to happen.
No, that's never going to happen. That's not how public and school administrations roll. Once they get it in their ideals that they're going to get rid of somebody, that's just it. So I've been through some of it before in different capacities, but as far as obviously pretty different from what they kind of accused you of. But I know that once they decide that they want to move something or take care of something or get rid of somebody, they're gonna get it done no matter what it is. And it could be so post that. I'm curious, post that whole scenario, what was they put the principal went in place as the head coach.
Yep.
What was their process after? Was there somebody else that they were looking to put in place, or is this simply they were trying to wipe you out of there? Was there any inkling like the year before that there was an issue that you thought they were trying to put you out? Was there anything like that any one of these parents had expressed to you beforehand or anything like that throughout the season, that there were people that were disgruntled or something like that?
No, that was the amazing part throughout this whole thing, Dave, is the parents, 99% of them, minus that one family,
Right.
Tremendous support before and through and after. Again, they read letters in front of the board on January 26th at a formal board meeting, to which the board's response was basically, thank you for your input. So you got
Right.
a whole,
That's always,
whole
that's always
community.
the response. That's always going to be the response.
But you got a whole community of parents and players who are saying, Coach did nothing. We want him back. You would think, and then the police report of non-criminality, that should have been it. Lock, stock, and barrel. Should
Right.
never have gotten that far. But
Right.
once it did, that should have been it.
See, the issue is with coaches, and we've talked about this before. We had another coach that had a different situation, but similar result. Basically, what ends up happening is because coaching contracts are 1 year renewable, and they basically it says basically if they don't feel whatever the reason is, they can get rid of you, right? And they can move on from you, and they can trump up anything for any reason, unless you weren't in the school, I'm assuming, right?
I was a Schedule B. I worked outside of the school and was doing this, as a Schedule B staff member.
Right. So that makes it easier for them to move on somebody, because they don't have to worry about the teachers union coming in and fighting with them, right? So they probably gave you a teachers union person if you wanted it, but that person's not going to be able to do anything nor care.
Nope.
So from that standpoint, and it seems to be a monumental issue that happens a lot in coach, especially in New Jersey, but I'm sure all over the country these things happen. So I'm not shocked at all by this, having been through it myself in a different capacity, but been through it myself. We've already interviewed another coach that had a situation like that, and the theme kind of is whatever they get in their head, they want to get rid of somebody for whatever the reason is, without you having any privy or knowledge or knowing why that is. They will come up with whatever they need to do to be able to give them a reason for that. What I am a little shocked at is that, and Derek, I'm sure you have comments on this too, is the depth that they went to get rid of you, with meaning trumping up potential police charges in an area where there was nothing. That's where I'm really like,
you know what I mean? I look at it like this, right? Okay. And this is just my opinion. Holmdel's a different type of place, right? You're dealing with a little bit different, I don't know, I guess you want to say more of an upper echelon, really, that have the ability to kind of go and do those certain types of things, or can manifest those certain types of things. So I think that plays a role, one. I also feel that, as a younger player, right, the investment was, we need to make something that's going to stick, so that this is, a no holds barred, knock it out of the park, gone, never have to deal with type of situation again. So I think that plays a role too. And I think, in reality, when a parent feels the need to get something done, the level of things that they'll go to make it happen, or to go through it, and will drum up whatever it takes. I think it's absolutely incredible the lengths that some of these parents and people will go to get it done. And then I think at the end of the day, we talk about this all the time, Dave, right? When we talk about school boards and administrators, and when it comes to public education and all those kind of things, when enough people make enough noise, it doesn't matter, because the administrators and those people will side with people, with those people every single time. And like I said, we are not protected as coaches, because we're on year-to-year contracts, right? They can ultimately get rid of us, at any time, based off of, evidence or not, coach, and it's extremely unfortunate, because, you see these situations, and, you're doing all the right things, and, playing the game the right way and doing all these kind of things. And then all it takes is a certain allegation, after what you think is, here you are, you get a phone call or an email, and it's like, hey, you think it's a good thing, and all of a sudden you literally have your world ripped out from under you, and not like a cut or dry with evidence, right? And I think that's the part that really bothers me the most, is there wasn't something clear cut that could have been told to you about, hey, it's this is the reason, this is why it's happening, or, hey, we need to fix this or do this, or, there was no open communication when it came to that. You're kind of left there, grasping at straws, trying to figure out what's going on. And I think that's the part that really bothers me the most, is there was no clear cut, high and dry, like, coach, this is it. This is what it is. This is where it's coming from. No, defend yourself. You had no options, right? You had nothing that you could even go to. I think that's the part that really bothers me the most.
Yeah, I agree with you, Derek. I think you hit on a couple of key points there. Number one, you referred to it. It was incredible, the lengths that parents go to. I actually consider it shameful that the lengths.
Oh, absolutely.
Some people will go to, and in this case, one family was willing to levy these completely false accusations,
right,
and to prop their daughter up, right? They used two other people's daughters as weapons against me, and their own daughter as a shield to protect them from any kind of
which in my eyes, like what are you now teaching your own daughter?
Yeah.
Right?
Which,
so what example are you setting, right? Like, what example
I don't
are you
think they
setting?
care about that. So I think in sports parents as a whole, like you have people that care about those kind of things. Most people probably care about doing the right thing, but
like morals. Like, they don't care about morals whatsoever.
I think there's a lot of people that do not care about doing it. I think that there is enough people in sports and that do not. I mean, I think that's part of the biggest problem in sports in general, is that you could have say you had 100 kids on your team. I mean, it only takes 2 or 3 people on that team that are willing to cause a huge headache for it to be a problem for anybody, right? And so without protection for coaches, without protection for them to be able to be able to coach the way that they need to coach, you have a situation where it doesn't matter what the administration, the parents just jump over ADs, they jump over head coaches, they jump over, and they'll go to whatever administrator will listen. And my thought process on a lot of this stuff is, okay, the shift is that you have a lot of administrators that will listen to things,
and that's the problem.
Without asking questions that are appropriate questions right away, because the only things schools care about in general is not getting sued. That's it.
Dave, you hit it on the head, and that was my next comment to Derek too.
Yep.
It's just the in this particular case, but in a lot of these elected boards, or these, this so-called administration, there is a lack of leadership. There's a lack of willingness to be accountable to what the direction and what the decisions are being made by the school. They hid behind this. They hid behind it because there wasn't a superintendent. There was an acting superintendent. They had so many holes in that board. They hid behind it because they had a 2-year principal who was non-tenured. They hid behind it because there was an athletic director who had been with the school for 2 weeks. Can you imagine that poor AD 2 weeks, and all of a sudden he's in the middle of this storm, right? And none of them took the reins to lead through this. None of them did. Not one of them said, hey, come in and let's have a conversation around this. Because if they had, that would have lasted about 45 minutes to an hour. My whole staff would have been back on that sideline, and we would have been able to finish that season that we had started for the rest of the girls. And it would have been very clear that one family, one girl, was disgruntled to the point that they were willing to go to these depths and ruin something for an entire team. And I feel bad for that young lady. I feel bad because she's being taught wrong, right? You don't have to earn things anymore. You don't have to go out and practice hard to get better. Right. As a matter of fact, at the end of her junior year, she was at her 4th high school. What is that message?
Yeah.
There's plenty of parents
just shows you what it is.
Care. That's the problem, that there's plenty of parents that do not care about that. And that, to me, that's the job of the administrators, right? To care about that. Yeah. That's their job, because policing thousands of parents every year is almost impossible, right? You can't know everybody's personality, but their job is to make sure that they do the right thing and they conduct themselves the right way. And I think that's that's unfortunately what you said, the leadership breakdown is like, you're never, it'd be nice to say that you're going to be able to coach your whole career and never have parents complain and never have a parent it's impossible.
Right.
But when something comes up, it's the that's beyond the coach's control or beyond the coach's capability, right? You need an administrator that goes there and says, hey, the buck stops here.
Right.
Tell me what the issue is. Okay, this is not an issue. This is a non-issue. And when they go and say, because this is what the parent will say, if you don't do something, we will sue. Okay, that's where you very quickly bring in the lawyer of the school. Every school has a lawyer. You bring that damn parent down to administration and say, what is your exact lawsuit that you think you're going to take towards us? And you walk them right down. The second they walk right in, and you say, come on with me. So they feel the pressure. And you say, hey, let's go. We're gonna have a conversation. You said the word sue. We're gonna go have a conversation with our lawyer, and we want to find out what your potential accusation is. Yep. And I could tell you that most parents will shit their pants the second you do that. Yep. They 100%. Will shit their pants because they haven't thought it out yet. They haven't thought about which lawyer they're going to reach out to for a frivolous claim. And almost all lawyers, as soon as they unless they just want to take on a losing case for no reason, if there's a case that really is a frivolous case, okay, then you got a situation where most of those lawyers will be like, listen, you're gonna have to pay to retain me. And you know what's gonna happen when a parent says they have to pay to retain them? I don't care how rich they are. No, they're not gonna bother. Okay. Yeah, right. And I think that's what more administrators need to do. Oh, there's an issue. Great. Okay. You want us to talk to this issue? Is this something we could talk to the coach about? Absolutely. No, this is why I'm here talking to you, right. Mr. Principal. Okay, right. Well, if, we don't think has been an issue, but we'll talk to the coach. Well, if you don't do something, we're going to sue. Oh, you're going to sue? Come with us. We're going to meet with the Board of Education lawyer, so we can get your exact claim. So we can go and address it accordingly, because you mentioned that word. But nobody has the balls to do that, okay? Because they're worried about their dumb $150,000 a year job that they think is going to be everything to them. They're weak. So that's the bottom line on most administrations. And when you get a strong administrator, they stop that. Yeah.
Okay? Right. They stop it right away. And I think that's something that's kind of the society that we're living in right now. Is, look, leadership is hard, right? Like when you're a leader or you're the boss or you're the head coach, right? You're not going to be liked by everybody. You're going to have to make some hard decisions where, some people aren't going to like you. Some are. There's always going to be that level of that, right? And leadership is hard. So when you get these guys that are now administrators, who have always been okay with, they want to be everybody's friend and they want to be tight with parents and they want to do all of this other kind of stuff. It's like, well, I'm sorry, but that's not why you're getting paid that high level.
Right? That's all they are doing is protecting their ass. Yeah. It's not about being anybody's friend. They don't care about being anybody's friend. They want to protect their ass, their job. They're worried about themselves because they're worried about, oh, what if I get fired? I'm the next target on the list. Instead of standing up, for God's sakes. People in private industry have to do it all the time. You don't like it? Oh, you don't have to patronize us anymore. Oh, you want to sue? All right, go ahead and sue. I have a lawyer I can get too, right? And then they make a real decision on that. But the administrators are not equipped. Other than the superintendent should be, but in this case, you had an acting superintendent, so you really had a major issue. The superintendent usually is someone that can actually really kind of decipher, is this going to be an issue that we're going to, you may have principals that just don't have the capabilities to do that, and athletic directors don't have the capability, but the superintendent could really go ahead and say, hey, this is nonsense. But in this case, you had a kind of a weak superintendent because he was an acting superintendent. So he was in one of those. They knew that the parent that he was in a rock and he or she, I don't know.
Right. The parents knew. They leveraged all of that.
Right. That person was between a rock and a hard place, and now they they really there wasn't they didn't want to get themselves in trouble, and that's why they brought police in, because they were covering all their bases, and so they didn't get sued, because what basically happened was the police were, okay, this is basically there's nothing here. Now it goes back to the school. The school says, well, we're not going to retain this guy, but we know that there's no charges going to be brought against us as the school. So that's the reason why they brought all those girls. I don't know that they brought them in to try and find something on you. I think they brought them in, and I think it was wrong they did it. But I think they brought it in to clean the school, to clear the school of any wrongdoing that there wasn't going to come around, because they sue you, right? Obviously, there's only so much money you can get. They sue the school, there's ample amount of money. So they would sue Holmdel, and then obviously put Coach Ault on the kind of lawsuit, but they would be suing the school, and that's what they were trying to do, is be like, okay, we're not at any fault, and the police essentially cleared that with their statement, and now they're like, hey, we're going to get rid of everybody, start anew, or whatever we're going to do, and go from there, and now this whole thing will no longer be an issue. But you're right, the person that was affected was the girl. Okay, whether she has morals or not morals, she's a young girl. There was her parents are the ones that took that on that fight to try and cause an issue there. So I mean, I think, listen, from your standpoint, so talk about what we're missing, because we're in the last 5 minutes before we have to go into another podcast. Talk about what we're missing. Like if we go and get the book, like what more, because this sounds like a fascinating read, not just obviously it's a terrible story, obviously. It's a story that you don't want to write about, but
kudos to you, Coach, for putting it all together, right?
Absolutely.
Taking the time to put the book together to like other people can get this. You know what I'm saying? Like this happens a lot more. I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but it happens a lot more. And now that this can get out there, like, people need to understand that these types of situations happen a lot more than really kind of get, some of it gets swept under the rug. So kudos to you, Coach, for kind of bringing it to light.
Yeah, thank you. And that's really the crux of it, right? That things like this happen in life, and a lot of times they get swept under the rug and never really fully detailed. So this is not just about the Holmdel incident. Obviously, that's the straw that broke the camel's back. It's the crescendo of the whole book, but this goes through 33 years of my coaching experience, and the recognition that over that time, as we're getting into the modern days, and I'm telling you, there's less than 10 parents that I had these kind of interactions with, but they became increasingly more intense, increasingly more volatile, increasingly more risky in the terms of what they're willing to do to try and position their kid, whether the kid's ready or not for what they're trying to position them for. It didn't matter. Right. It's what the parent wanted. And so I just kind of go through some of these and listen, some of the stories, it goes back to when I was at the prep school, it goes back to when I was at Holy Family. Some of the stories worked out great. One of my most mortal enemies in the coaching 7th and 8th grade boys, I coached both of his sons. And at the end of the day of coaching his second son, he actually thanked me for making his boys better men. And
damn right.
I saw him a couple of weeks ago, unfortunately, at a funeral of one of my former players. But, we hugged it out. It was like we're buddies. We'd go to the bar and have a beer if you want. But it didn't start that way.
It's usually how a lot of those situations happen, though, Coach, right? Like you see that a lot, right? It's like at first, look, you kind of clash heads, and then, you start to see how what happens, the positivity to it. And then by the end of it, it's like, yeah, you're going to have a beer together, right? That's how a lot of these situations happen.
Yeah, I think when you sit down and actually realize that both parent and coach, regardless of the sport, should be working toward the same goal, which is the betterment of that child. Now, betterment doesn't mean you're going to make them a starter. They may not be ready for that. Some kids are better bench players or role players than they ever will be starters.
Absolutely.
Some people may not get more than a couple minutes a game, but if they're going out there and giving their best, they're learning the lessons through practice of hard work and earning your spot and teamwork and the chemistry that's going to be involved in any kind of team environment to help you be successful beyond basketball or football or baseball, whatever sport it is. And that's one of the things that I took to heart, was trying to get my kids, no matter where I coached, male or female, to understand that there's something. First of all, to be a part of a team, you're part of something much bigger than yourself. But at the end of the day, there's a whole big wide world out there that you're going to get ready for, that you may never even play basketball again. But you can take some of these skill sets and the things that you learn from this game, from getting along with your teammates, from the successes and failures that you have, that can help you down the road.
Yes, and the sad part of it is that it's becoming more and more prevalent, and the issue that has to, for high school sports, which is the beauty, unique thing that we have in not just our state but the United States, is actually having high school sports. Because if you go throughout the world, there is no such thing.
Yeah.
It's all club, it's all that kind of stuff, and that more and more high schools are putting themselves in a situation like when coaches are upset that kids play a lot of club sports and all those kind of things. Well, part of it is because you can't retain guys like you as a coach, because it's hard to retain great coaches unless the administration is, and that's why you see certain places really have a lot more success than other places, because they have better administrations. And you could point to that almost lock, stock, and barrel. And anytime a program, a high school or something changes and then all of a sudden their athletic department gets better, you could probably point to the fact that they, not just that they have a good coach, because that's part of it, but that they have an administration that's willing to help those coaches be successful.
The alignment too, right, Dave? Everybody has a common, the common, alignment from top to bottom. Everybody's on the same page, right? Like, who protects who.
Otherwise, it's completely on the coach. Like, it literally comes to like, you ex-coach goes in, has a great year, great, but in the long run, that's not going to be a place you're going to be able to be, because you're going to already see like, this program is good, this program is bad. But when you go to a place, you see every program's good. You could bet your bottom dollar that yes, those coaches are good coaches, but it's really not about.
But it's how everything works together collectively. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's what a lot of these school administrations miss out on, and they kind of get into their own little silos, and this is how schools do things. But quite honestly, out in the real world, I'm a regional vice president for a manufacturer, right? I have to lead 9 people, and I have to lead all 9 of them the right way, and be able to coach not just my best sellers, but the person who's just coming out of a training program, and get them ready to get to that position and understand. And this is the biggest part that parents miss: be patient with that process, right? Here's a freshman player that wanted to be on a varsity team, and if it weren't for the shape of the Holmdel program that I took on, where there were only 16 kids in the entire program, we wouldn't have needed freshmen, right? And it's not every school that requires freshmen to play at the varsity level. So just be patient with that process. And in the real world, when I'm out there, I have to be able to realize that my young salesperson coming out of training is going to screw up every now and then. And I've got to be able to have that crucial conversation with them around, hey, you screwed up, but that's okay. What are the lessons that we took out of this? How do we get you better?
Absolutely. It's a great point. And we'll end on that note. The book is Out of Bounds. You can go on Amazon.com to find it. Its author is Darren Ault. Make sure you check that book out. It's a part of it's a sad story about how society is and everything, but it's a good lesson. It's something that we could all learn and help coaches to really understand what to expect, so they can help themselves to navigate those waters as they go further. Coach, I can't thank you enough for being on. We could talk to you all day. We have to jump to another one, but it was great having you on. Best of luck with everything going forward. It sounds like you're doing very well. So
thank you. Thank you for
Coach. Really appreciate you taking the time, man.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I appreciate the support and the opportunity to share the story. It is available on Ingram, Spark, and Barnes & Noble too. So pretty much anywhere you can get a book, it should be there. But I encourage people to read it, because there are lessons there for coaches, players, administrators, parents, in any sport, not just basketball.
Appreciate you, Coach. Thank you.
Thank you, Coach. Have a great day.
Have a great day. See you.